Did God create man, or did ancient men create gods we used to fear but now find amusing? To help me answer that question is one of my best friends since junior high school who grew up Catholic like I did, but he's still a believer and I'm an arrogant atheist. So, what say you, bud?
Yeah, let's talk.
So, by the way, I did want to throw this in there, and if it sounds like I'm reading it, it's because I am, and it's because I don't just want to get my words correctly; I want to get the ideas correctly. But this will be a very quick thing. I don't want.
So it's not a disclaimer.
Yeah, pretty much. You could say it's a disclaimer, because I don't intend this to be a debate about whether God is real or not. There's more than enough of those out there with people who are philosophy majors, and by the way, I think those debates, that's part of the problem. They end up.
But these people don't even have like relationships. You and I, we've known each other since junior guys. So I mean, for all intents and purposes, this is not ever a debate because we've known each other that long and we've been friends that long. So those people that do those debates, usually hate each other from the get-go.
Well, there's that. And also, I think they end up complicating things. They end up really confusing other people when they start using, terms like axiomatic presuppositions and unfalsifiable claims and dispositive.
Yeah, me too.
And which is understandable. I mean, that is those are the terms of philosophy when you're really, approaching it from that angle. I really would like to approach it from the layman's term, but what I would hope this video does is kind of expose how the religious sausage gets made. I mean, talk about layman's terms and just have fun with it. But I do want to show it from this angle, especially with someone like you, that we've known each other since we were kids and we both grew up Catholic, but for some reason you remained a believer. I did not. And that's what I really want to show, why it is some people remain believing, and the majority, by the way, because of all my other friends that I grew up, and my family for that matter, I think I can count in one hand how many people would say they're an atheist. It's very few people in my circle of friends that would go with atheist. The majority are religious. And that's what I would love to show with this video, especially for people who grew up religious, but like me, they sensed there was something wrong. Like they sensed these things are false. It doesn't make sense, but they don't know how to express it. And they also don't want to cut off relationships with their family and friends. You want to stay with your family and friends, but then that's the other thing. A lot of times when you get together with family and friends, it's over holidays that tend to be religious.
Thanksgiving isn't religious, is it? No.
Well, it is. It's a way of saying thanks to God. I mean, I believe the Pilgrims, which were definitely religious, escaping religious persecution when they came over, so they were definitely religious, and I think that's a big part of it. I'm all for the gratitude. Like whenever I do have Thanksgiving with my family and they do the prayer, I'm not going to fight it. I sit there, hold hands with people.
So you're not going to be like the football players that kneel during the anthem?
The atheist kneel. The atheist kneel. No, I'm not that arrogant, and I'm not that annoying. And I think that's the other problem. A lot of atheists, prominent atheists, when I say atheist, they're turning people off to the very thing they're trying to convince them about. And even though I'm not trying to convert you, and I know that nobody goes from being religious to atheist overnight, and again, that's not the point of this. The point of this is to show how and why people believe and why others stop,
Okay.
But
here, let me give a few ideas out, and we can discuss them. So when we grew up Catholic, at one point or another, for a while, I ended up, getting married, this and that. In that marriage, I'd always heard about, born again Christians, and we thought, those are the snake charmers, and the guys that want to dunk you in the water, and it was always looked upon weird. But as I went on through the years, because I didn't turn into a pastor or anything, I'm still struggling with my own earthly, fleshly desires and what we call sin sometimes. But it's a tough life. But being a believer in Christ, for us at least as Christians, because now we're born again Christian, you were baptized in the water and you're baptized in the Spirit. So at that point, now you have the Holy Spirit in you, accepting Jesus as your Lord and Savior. That life, it's not like somebody, when you get dunked, all of a sudden you come up and like, wow, I know everything about the Bible and my life's going to change. A lot of people don't have that. Jesus says in the Bible that the Christian life is a hard life because you will be persecuted. You will be looked down upon as, a weirdo or whatever else the case may be. But as I've been maturing in life and, in the belief in Christ and having miracles in the sense of like answered prayers come about and certain situations that like, wow, I could have died there, but for some obvious reason I didn't, has happened. And I say, okay, there has to be some higher power out there. And you start believing more. But it's the belief, not like the Catholics that where you have to go, like for instance, priests can't marry. Well, the Bible doesn't say that. That's Catholicism. That's religion that's turned that into some perverse way of being. And then what happens? What's the outcome of that, Nabo?
I don't know what you mean. In terms
the priests and younger boys.
I see what you're getting at. No, of course.
It starts getting perverse in the sense where why would you hold this man back from his most basic nature of wanting to have sex, and of course through marriage be the only way, as men alone we're not, impervious to those temptations. There's been a lot of pastors who are married and have ended up cheating on their wives, because they became famous or something in their church or something else, so we're not perfect. We never were, we never will be, but those of us like you, I don't want to poke at you, but that don't believe in a higher power, then we want to ask you why.
Well, it's funny because I was about to ask you, why would you believe? Not so much in a higher power. Why would you believe in things?
If I believe in the natural world, like science and things that we have and things that we can touch, why not have a spiritual side as well? If you, like you said, what's the term that you use for the energy? Tell me again, energy and matter, Dan.
Well, that's the first law of thermodynamics. That supposedly, and I'm not supposedly, that's the beauty of science. For the most part, it's true until proven otherwise. And that's the other reason why I always go with science as opposed to religion, because with science, I never get the threats. I never get the threat of eternal damnation or like the Islamic threat of death.
Well, no, but what's the terms? The way you say it is energy and matter can't be
you're right. So to
can't
state,
be destroyed, only transferred.
Right. From the way I know it, the first law of thermodynamics states that matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed. It just transfers from one form to another, usually through heat.
But when you say they can't be created or destroyed, but energy is created and matter is created, we have it.
No. Well, that's where, look, I wish we had an actual scientist here. What I'm going by is, like, in other words, and this was proven pretty much with, I believe, Einstein's special relativity, because people always confuse the E equals MC squared with the other major one, like the thing that really made Einstein famous, like what made the world pay attention to him wasn't necessarily E equals MC squared, even though that's what everybody remembers him for. What made the world pay attention to him was his theory on general relativity about gravity, when he discovered how gravity does not work the way Isaac Newton stated. But anyway, coming back to how do you, the first law of thermodynamics, it's kind of been almost proven through E equals MC squared, especially with the atomic bomb and stuff like that. And they've seen that basically
you can make lots of energy from just a little bit of matter.
Right. That energy and matter are interchangeable. And I'm gonna go by it. I might be getting some things wrong, obviously, but it seems like scientists have yet to be able to make, for example, an atom disappear. That you cannot completely make something just go into nothing. Like even vacuums. The other day I was watching a really good documentary on how they create vacuums, which, by the way, I didn't know that all light bulbs are essentially a vacuum to a large degree.
Yeah, it's a vacuum tube.
But and by the way, not to get too sidetracked, the other reason why I wanted to have this conversation with you is because you're pretty much the first person I always call when something goes wrong in my house. And that's one of the other things that I wanted to show about this video. You are someone who you definitely respect reality because you have to, especially since you work with electricity. You and I have worked on major projects. You and I have worked on major projects on chiller stations and whatnot, if I'm getting that term correctly. So you know that there's aspects of reality that you do not want to ignore. You ignore it at your peril.
Yeah, you ignore things at your peril sometimes.
So, and then that's the thing. The same processes or the whatever goes on in our brains and in your brain that makes you realize, you know, that this has to be this, like the electricity has to be on or off and there's no in between. Something goes missing for religious people when it comes to their beliefs, because that's the thing. And one of the things that I really wanted to talk about was, why don't I believe? Because there's so many things that I was taught as a Catholic that just don't make sense. Beginning with, we're all God's children, but Jesus is his one and only son. Even in kindergarten, I didn't know how to put it into words, but I was like, those two statements, I'll finish it really quick. Those two statements cannot be true at the same time. Either we're all God's children or Jesus is his only son. But then really quick.
Let me answer. So God created man, so we are his children. God didn't create Jesus. Jesus was there from the beginning.
See, that's where here is.
Jesus is not a created being like we are. He is like God. That's why he could do the things he did.
This is where you and I completely go our separate ways.
Yes. This is where we turn around from each other.
This is where we're still, waving at each other, but we're going down two very different roads.
Well, I mean, you can let me try to explain a little bit.
No, go ahead. And go ahead.
Okay. That energy that we speak of that can be transferred, or it can be transferred, but it cannot be destroyed. We as physical beings, we have matter, but we also have an energy. And it's been recorded that we do have some bioelectricity going on in a thing that doesn't have. How do you produce electricity? Usually in the mechanical world, you have to have some sort of spinning magnets and this and that, and some wiring and some sort of engine to push. Like the Hoover Dam, the water runs through, spins the dynamos, and the dynamos create enough friction in the magnets and the copper to make electricity. Well, we don't have that inside of us. So what creates that bioelectricity? To me, that is the spirit, the soul of the person, that energy. At that point, when you die, and if you're a believer in God, your energy, your soul, your spirit goes to heaven. And if you don't believe in God, that's where we all, everybody will freak out. But if you don't have Jesus as your Lord and Savior, you will go to hell. And it's a black and white, but it's also not black and white, because there is a big gray area in the sense of he knows, when Jesus came down and he said to his Father, he's like, basically, I'm not quoting the Bible verse for verse, but he was sent down here to try and make sense of man. So when he saw all the brokenness, all the heartache, but there's still all the good in people and all, and it all starts in the heart. So he ended up saying, I'm going to, the plan was to give up his life for all of our sins, so that when we go to heaven and tell his Father, this is our lawyer, basically Jesus is our lawyer, he's looking out for us because we believe in him. And that's how we get to heaven. In the laymanest terms, because I'm no Bible expert. I do enjoy the Bible. I've read it a few times, and we still have Bible studies every night. And it's just to better ourselves. And, I consider myself to be a decent human being. I try to love on my neighbors. I'm a generous person, even though I don't have much. I don't step on the feet of others to get where I need to go. If I can help you, I will help you first before I help myself. So, and that's kind of like the Jesus trait, you know what I mean? Like, like when Jesus is my homie, we act the same, we try to be the same. Yeah, but we'll never get to that level of his because we are broken. We have sin in our lives, and that's always going to be there till the day we die. That's why people turn around, from being really religious to not religious at all, and then vice versa. People understand the rule of the spirit when it comes to that time when you finally have some miracle or some obvious sign that, yes, there is a spiritual realm out there, that you become a believer, strong or not strong. The Bible says we're all given a measure of faith. So that means a measuring cup. You have a quarter cup, you have a half a cup, I have a whole cup. Some people have more faith than others. It's tough, dude. Unless we've experienced, like I always said if I could travel back in time, I would go back and see those moments in that wedding when Jesus turned water to wine. I'd be like, let me have a glass of that. That's probably really good. You know what I mean? So we don't see any of that nowadays, you know, because we're in a fallen world, dude. We're at this point, God said, I'm cleaning my hands of you guys until the return. And that's like in street terms, basically. Because there's so many scriptures and so many, you know, parts of the Bible that people pick at sometimes. And they'll pick out just certain scriptures and not others, and it's like, well, they kind of all coincide. So all the prophecies that Isaiah was speaking about hundreds of years before Jesus was born, he pretty much, you know, embodied them all. And one of the ones that trips me out is that how did Jesus, you know, because people say, oh, Jesus was faking it. Well, how did he know he was going to be born in the same place Isaiah was, you know, talking about in his book? Because he's going to be born in was Bethlehem or something like that. So at that point, he can't really he can't, you know, make that up. He was born in that town. So, and just things like that. It's like he was a real person. That can't be denied. People in history can say, yeah, there's other cultures that have written about Jesus as being a real person. So, you know, when at least you're a smart atheist. Some other people sometimes, oh, Jesus was fake. Really? Okay, the world is flat for you, obviously. Go away.
I'm glad you said everything you said, because that's one of the things that I wanted to capture, how religious people are so secure in their beliefs about the things that Jesus did. And for example, like when I was telling you how, for me, when I was a kid, I already knew there was something wrong with, you know, we're all God's kids, we're all God's children, but Jesus is his only son, and those things couldn't be the same. I no longer question those things. Now, here's my take. I say they're false, and I would even go so far as to say I'm willing to, because that's the thing. How can you prove a negative? You can't, because a negative is basically a void. You know, it's
Well, wait, what are you calling a negative?
No, in other words, I don't doubt that Jesus existed. And as a matter of fact, I'm gonna link a really good documentary below the video by PBS, and it was. And by the way, documentaries from PBS nowadays, take them with a grain of salt. They're very left of center, but this particular documentary was initially aired back in 1998. Very good, and it's called From Jesus to Christ. Maybe you've seen it before. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
No, I want to
really
look at
great.
It now.
really great. And it's like, it's 2 parts, pretty long, but obviously nowadays on YouTube, you can take your time. I know that's the other beauty of the PBS documentaries. You could watch them on YouTube with no ads at all. PBS is no good.
Well, here,
but really quick,
just a little bit of well, no, I'm going to just answer from what you just said. Religion to me is not. I don't consider myself a religious person.
I'll get to that one.
My relationship with Christ, the Spirit of Christ. So when Christ died, he left his Spirit behind as the Holy Spirit for us to commune with, basically, to be able to use, to pray to, and to get help from in our spirits when our spirits are weak. So if that, in that turn, I do not consider myself a religious person or in any part of any religion. I am a believer in Christ and his Holy Spirit. That's it. You know, to me, there was one creator, and maybe, you know, who knows? There's space between spaces and black holes and an infinite universe out there beyond what we see in our sky. You know, so how can we, as such finite and small creatures, ever say that there isn't a higher power or some sort of super being out there? We can't. We can't say it's not real if we've never really come to see it, you know? So we can't disprove it. We can't also say it's not there.
But here's the thing. The problem is then you have to believe every single religious claim that comes from Muslims, from Hindus, from Buddhists, from, well, Jewish people, because a lot of Christians tend to forget they're basically second-rate Jews. Christians and Muslims are basically second and third-rate Jews. Christianity and Islam are basically television spin-offs of Judaism.
Well, Jesus was Jewish. Jesus was Jewish.
Yeah.
He wasn't Christian. He created Christianity basically by abolishing all the, that's like 900 something rules that the Jewish religious leaders started to create on their own. And he's like, you're wrong, all their piety, and like he walked into a group of where these very high religious guys with their don suits, and they were like the high society of the time. He went in there and told them like it was, and to me, Jesus was never, some sort of like, he never showed off. You know what I mean? Like when he did miracles and stuff, he wasn't like, hey, look, everybody, I'm going to do this. He did it in secret sometimes, dude. And people talked about it. People talked about him to the point where he'd have crowds of people gathering so much that they'd almost overwhelm him. At one point, I remember they had him on a beach, and they were pushing him back enough to where a point was that he had to get in a boat and paddle out a little because the beachhead was completely filled with people wanting to hear what he had to say. So, it's like, all right. And a lot of religious figures in the past, like the Pope, for instance, the Pope has, commands a giant crowd. I remember when he came to Florida, dude, when I think I was still in middle school or high school. No, middle school, I think. And we got to go see him at the park that was nearby the house when he came. And, it was a huge crowd, dude. And anytime you see him on TV, and those churches are filled. But, it's still Catholicism. It's still got that broken system of that man-made control. And a lot of religions have come that way. Because look, the Quran, I'm sure, didn't start the way it is, the way it's been interpreted now in the sense through these, what do you call them? I don't want to say terrorists, but, basically these people, they've turned it into something else.
No, as a matter of fact, they what a lot of these terrorists are doing is pretty much what I could only imagine the Prophet Muhammad was doing himself. He was a warlord. And that's the whole thing. Like, what I do find interesting is how religious people have like this blind spot towards the manipulative aspects of religion that are clearly there. And here's the way you know that there's a manipulative aspect to it. With Christianity, if you do not believe that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, you're burning in hell forever. With Islam, if you do not believe that, the Prophet Muhammad was, the ultimate prophet and practically a Messiah, they'll just kill you. With Hinduism, just really quick.
Jesus wasn't a warlord.
No, okay. There's reasons why certain religions continued on and others didn't. And by the way, that's why that whole documentary on PBS From Jesus to Christ, what's really good about it is that it's the people that are being interviewed and talking, they are, I believe, theologians. If I am not mistaken, the majority of them are probably religious. They're all from religious colleges, but they really talk about God, about Jesus from a very historical point of view, and they're being really honest about the inconsistencies of the New Testament. How the book of Mark, Luke, you would know Mark, Luke, John, and Matthew, right? Those are the four apostles, or at least the four, right? How very different they are from each other. Very different. Oh
yeah, these were people from different backgrounds. Some were fishermen. Like his 12 disciples.
No. But my point is, they are saying here. The point I'm trying to finish is they're talking about events from very different perspectives. Same events. Like for example, I think the agony in the garden. It's almost from completely. You would almost think one person went to one agony in the garden and one person went to another. And right now, it's a shame. I can't remember the way they were describing the Last Supper, but major inconsistencies. Because to top it off, they started writing
these. These are told from different angles. From like, all right, so I wrote my book, and then somebody told you about my book, and you recounted my account in your own words. So, but they're still counting the same account.
There's a general gist to it. There's no doubt about it. But it goes to show, the point I'm trying to make is, it goes to show how man-made all of that is. These are the words of men.
Those are words that men said. Yeah, it's an account. Look, what is the news? Somebody saying, hey, I just saw an accident on such and such street. And then he tells it to somebody else and somebody else. And by the time it gets to the end of the street, the end of the block, whatever, It's a totally different address. It's a totally different color car. You know what I mean? And that's just in 5 minutes. Imagine
Exactly.
over the hundreds of years.
Exactly.
You know, things that do get maybe shifted around, but the core belief is still there now.
No, but my point is, as it is nowadays, I think courts a lot of times dismiss eyewitness accounts because they're not very reliable. Yeah. That's basically what the New Testament is, according to these apostles. They're basically eyewitness accounts. So that in itself is already very shaky as far as evidence is concerned.
But if you take a Bible from 1879 and you take a nowadays Bible and it's still the same words, you know what I mean? So it hasn't been changed much. You know, if you take a Bible from, let's say, where the first Christian Bible came out that had the New and Old Testament, you know, the King James Bible, let's say the first one, what year do you think it came out? I don't know, 1300s, 1200s?
All I'd have to do is look it up, and I forgot because King James.
But that was that time when the Council of Nicaea, right? What was that, like 400 BC? AD?
Council of Nicaea with Constantine, I forgot the exact years, but that had to have been around maybe 300 AD. 300 AD. So that's 300 years after Jesus. Since then, it's been translated into different languages. I can't speak for other languages, you know, but it was started in Hebrew and Greek and other Aramaic and other different languages, and it was all put into Greek, right? No, I think they definitely ultimately translated them to Latin, but perhaps they did
Latin, yeah. But Latin or Greek comes from Latin, right?
I think Latin may be based on Greek.
Okay, well
now we're really, by the way, right now we're really showing how we are not professional historians.
We're not professionals, but the thing is that we're still getting our points across. Because, you know, to the layman term, if some guy starts talking science to me, I'm going to lose. You know what I mean? But I still have my belief and things that have happened to me that give me my faith.
Right, but now here's the thing. Look, to just let me get a few points in.
Go ahead.
The thing is that a lot of those things that you are calling your beliefs, which I don't doubt that you believe them and all that, there are so many things that you were saying before that I wanted to break in, but I didn't want to talk over you. There's a lot of things that we can demonstrate are false. We can demonstrate that they are man-made words. You know, and at some point, just like what I was pointing out.
Explain one though. You got to pick one. Let's get one so we can concentrate on that one.
Okay, the Earth was not created in 6 days, and because I know they do. By the way, just really quick, without getting too sidetracked, just very simple, yes or no. Have you ever read the Bible from cover to cover? Have you ever sat down?
Yes.
Oh, you have.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, it took 365 days.
Took you a year. All right. Now, I've been meaning to read it also cover to cover. I've read parts of it. Things like that. Look, here's another one that I know for sure did not happen. Jesus did not walk on water. He did not. The whole thing that you were talking about, how he turned water into wine, we know those things are just stories. Those things
are stories to you.
No, those are stories. Here's coming back to the whole thing. No, hey, let me finish. The whole point why I was trying to establish in the video for anybody who doesn't know you, you're really good with electricity, with plumbing, with construction. You're really good at knowing when reality has to be reality. But for some reason, for these things, all of a sudden reality goes out the window. All of a sudden, like if I were to tell you, hey, listen, like imagine you and I were working, like when we were working down on the Keys and stuff like that. And I was like, hey, you know what? Don't worry. I'm going to go walk across the pool. You'd be like, that's impossible. Nachi, you can't walk across the pool. But the fact that you're willing to believe that Jesus could walk on water and you never saw that, and it's not even an eyewitness account from thousands of years ago, or even let's say it was a supposed eyewitness account. Those things go against the very immutable laws of physics that religious people, for the most part, will respect in every other aspect of their life. But for this, there's this little pocket, this little sliver of anything goes. And then really quick, this is one of the major points I want to get across with this video. So in case people are watching like, holy shit, these guys have been just talking crap for 30 minutes. This is the real danger with that. That erodes critical thinking skills, which causes people to make really bad decisions in their lives, which I've seen, and I'm not going to get into personal stories of people I know, but when people think everything is a sign from God and people think they're being talked to by Jesus, they make really bad decisions in life. And I've seen it happen. It's happened with me too. Like when I was younger and I did believe. That's so beginning with that. But then I started to see it from other people because there's, and don't worry, I'm going to wrap this up very quick.
No, you're rambling. I want to get to the walking on water thing.
Okay. Here's the thing, because a lot of people say smart people learn from their mistakes, but truly smart people learn from other people's mistakes. I might be getting it wrong. That's when I started to realize I'll just learn from other people's mistakes. And the biggest mistakes.
Everybody makes mistakes anyways. Even if you're learning from some other body's mistakes, you're still making your own.
When people are having children, they know they can't afford to raise. With people they're pretty sure they're not in love with, but they think it's a sign from God. That's a major mistake. And that's at the core of a lot.
I agree with that totally, because we have a friend. We have a mutual friend who did that.
No, yeah. We don't need to even get into it. And I'm not even thinking of that one. The one that you're talking, okay. I'm thinking of quite a few other people, which I.
Okay, so let me get to the walking on water thing.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So you say there's no way Jesus could have walked on water. Well, if Jesus was all the things that people said he was, why not? If he could heal the sick and cure the blind,
guarantee that didn't happen.
Bring the dead back to life. Why not walk on water? Because he was that powerful. Those are the spiritual parts of the whole thing that you try to turn off, but you can't dispute it. You can't disprove it. None of us can. Nowadays, I don't think, look, he asked, I think it was Peter or one of his the apostles to get out of the boat and walk towards him. Because the guy's like, Lord, can I come out, to you? And he said, if you believe, come. If you have faith, come. And he walked out, and then he took a couple steps, and he ended up falling in the water. Why? Because his faith wavered. So in that case, can a really, 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 really faithful person walk on water? I don't know. In the recorded now history of man, there hasn't been anybody walking across a pool or the ocean or anything else. There hasn't been anybody who's actually, some account of some report from CNN. Oh, this man healed this little girl's cancer by touching her once and walking out of the hospital and never seeing anybody else again. But that doesn't happen. Even though there still are miracles. There's the kid that gets ejected from a car and, should have died and didn't die, didn't have a scratch on him, or on and on. The person who, and there has been accounts of people, and it's called a misdiagnosis, but people who were told they had stage 4 cancer and then went home, started juicing, started praying, started whatever they were doing, and I think that has a lot to do with it, was the natural part of the juicing that helped, but the praying alone, even if you're not a believer, dude, praying makes you feel better. Like, what I mean? It's like, to me, when I pray to God, it's basically like not dumping all my baggage on him. Even though he asked us, he told us that our yoke would never be more than we can handle. But a lot of people nowadays can't handle life, and they fall into drugs, they fall into suicides and this and that. And why? It's because most of those people, if you look at statistically, didn't have a belief system.
Oh, I don't doubt. By the way, really quick, something I wish I would have said before, so we don't, because something I wish I would have said before is, hey, let's try to give each other like 2 minute, 3 minute at best, but let's not try to talk more than 3 minutes. Now you did good, because I have these little hourglasses, like this little 2 minute hourglass. So you're good. You were within 2 minutes there. But I don't want it, because the problem is that when people talk too much, then too many ideas go past that.
So we have, exactly, and then I start losing like the one thing I wanted to tell you. So we have to have a little clicker. So when I know that it's your time, then it's your time, and my time is my time. And you don't overtalk, and I don't overtalk. Perfect. Is everybody in agreement? Thank you, audience.
No, and I'm doing it with this one, with these little hourglasses. The point is, when you were saying that there's no way to prove or disprove, no, we here, this is the pretty much the crux of one of the things that I really wanted to convey to people if they're hanging in there listening to this. We can and need to disprove falsehoods. First of all, it's done every single day throughout the world, especially in hospitals. You have to. And that's the thing. The same process that is used to disprove falsehoods in hospitals, when somebody thinks they're having a heart attack, but they're really just having that. Or look, like in the case of my sister. Here's a real life story, so I don't have to go into hypotheticals. My sister thought that she had a migraine headache for And since my sister has always had migraine headaches, she didn't really think much of it. But this particular migraine headache was taking more than 2 weeks to go. And by the way, I'm going to try to keep this, believe me, under the 2 minutes. So this was a very unusual migraine headache that was going beyond 2 weeks. She finally goes to the hospital, and they discover it's not a migraine headache. It's a tumor in her brain. So they had to open a hole in her skull to remove the tumor. In order to do that, you have to be very, very, very sure about what is true and what is false. And another reason why I bring this up is because there was a time that people would drill holes through other people's heads, but to let out demons. Okay, and that was called trepanning. And that a lot of people died needlessly over those things. That's why I'm trying to stress.
Yeah, but at this point, those are like crazy whacks, man.
No.
Quacks, you know what I mean? It's like the uber religious saying that we're going to get rid of your demons are the same guys that were hanging innocent women who were holistic herbalists or something, you know, burning them at the stake because, oh my God, you made my son's headache go away with an herb. How dare you? You know, those kind of religious people that, you know, for instance, somebody gets cancer. Oh, God's going to cure me. God's going to cure me. God's going to cure me. And you end up dying of cancer. And it's like, you have to have some belief system in the science as well. If you know what I mean? God gave that doctor the knowledge to cure you. Why won't you go to that doctor to get cured?
And there's a reason why the saying goes, God helps those who help themselves, because since there is no God to rely on, you have to help yourself in the end. That's the thing.
Well, in the sense of relying, like what? God's not going to open, or God's not going to give me that job promotion. Or I mean, I have to go work hard and show that I am engaged in the company and everything else. And then, you know, I'm on time. I'm a good employee. That's how you get a promotion. You know, I mean, yeah, God gives you the will to want to do good. You know, just like yin and yang, you have to have a good and you have to have a bad. So here on this earth, you know, evil people, I think, are influenced by the enemy, by the devil. And it's, you know, you may laugh at that, but, you know, it's true. We can't have a negative without a positive. We can't have day without light.
No, but here's the thing.
The way I see it.
No, and there's a reason why you do. And that's one of the main things that I'm trying to get across with this video is the reasons why the human brain ends up creating religions is because our brains are always trying to make sense of our environment. That's one of the double-edged sword of being human and having, you know, prefrontal cortexes and having reason and all that. The problem is, though, the human brain doesn't require it to be accurate. It just wants an answer, period. So, and that's why for the longest time, most people just assumed the earth was flat, you know, and you didn't need, and here's the other thing, you didn't really need to know that the earth was round to survive. The only things you need to do to survive on this planet is drink water, eat food, and preferably find some shelter. That's it. And yet it really would help if you did know that the earth is round and that it orbits the sun and that the sun is not really rising in the morning. It's an illusion because enough people were sacrificed. Human sacrifices were, especially with the Aztecs, because they believed that the sun god Huitzilopochtli needed human blood in order for it to continue rising in the morning. And those are the dangers that I'm trying to point out, especially to anybody who is still hanging on and listening and grew up religious like I did, but you know it's false. Here's the point I'm trying to make. I'm not claiming that I have all the answers, but one thing that really helps me is to avoid the falsehoods, and especially the demonstrable ones. And everything, and here's where I'm going to try to say this with all due respect, everything that you speak about Jesus with such security, like you're so sure, those are all false. Like the walking on water, especially bringing the live back from the dead, curing the blind. Like it makes no sense that he would cure one.
Lazarus.
Which one?
Lazarus, the one that he brought back from the dead, his friend, actually.
Okay. First of all, who's to say that that person was really dead? All right, let's begin with maybe the person was in some sort of coma, if that even happens, because I would not be surprised that that's just a story. That's just a made-up tale.
There was another story that there was a guy who was paralyzed. Everybody knew that he was paralyzed throughout the town. You know, he's now an adult, and he's been paralyzed since he was a kid. When Jesus was in that town, they had him in a house, and his friends, were like, "This guy's gonna cure you. This guy's gonna cure you." This is, by the way, the street slang of how to tell the story. So they went up. The place was so packed, they had to call up on the roof and open up the thatch roof enough to lower him down into the room. And Jesus ended up curing the guy. The guy stood up and walked. And then it's funny that everybody in the room saw that. Everybody in the house saw that. Like, oh my God, we know who that is. That's so and so. He just got up and walked. This guy's got to be for real. And the funny thing is that in the room, I guess, or there was somewhere nearby where there was a religious leader. And he's like, why couldn't you just heal him instead of telling him to get up or something like that? Like, it's like, is it easier to tell him his sins are forgiven or to tell him to get up and walk? And then let him know that his sins have been forgiven. And the fact that he was cured, the guy's going to go on believing that, oh my God, Jesus is for real. And he's going to tell everybody he can. So at those points, when those points come out like that, like, look, for instance, miracles. You don't believe in miracles, but us in the religious community and the believers ourselves do believe in miracles. I had one happen myself that I couldn't explain whatsoever. This was my daughter was born in the hospital. I'll try to make it as quick as possible. They put little bracelets on them, right? One on the wrist, one on the ankle. And we were, able to stay with her in the room, and she was there in the bed with us that first night, crying and crying and crying, and she wouldn't stop crying, and she wouldn't stop crying, and I eventually passed out. But I remember waking up to the nurses rushing into the room, and I remember before I had fallen asleep, Claudia was praying, God, please, whatever's making her cry this much and, causing her whatever, please to get rid of it, whatever, it is. And she was praying this way, but I fell asleep in between all this. But I get woken up by the nurses, lights get turned on. Claudia and I are both startled to awakening. They're saying, what's going on? And they're like, oh, the bracelet came off. And we're like, what bracelet? And they're looking at the baby, and I'm looking at her. The one on her ankle that was cutting into her skin. And I guess it was too tight. But the lady's like, did you guys take this off? And I'm like, no. She goes, well, somebody did. And I'm looking at my wife like, did you cut this? She goes, where was I going to get the scissors from? We're in a hospital room. You know what I mean? And looked at it, and we still have it to this day. It looks like somebody came in and cut the thing, Nachi. And
that's
the fact that they cut it set the alarm off. The fact that it was cut set the alarm off and sent the nurses into the room. So did an angel come and take care of it for us? I'm not going to be the one to say I don't believe that, because there's no other explanation. So to me, that was a miracle.
Okay, since you spoke over 2 minutes, I'm going to give myself a couple.
What do you think?
No, but finish. Go ahead and finish. Would
you just prove that as a miracle? Would you have some other answer for that?
I would not at all think that that's a miracle. I can only imagine somebody probably walked in there in the middle of the night when you were passed out, and they were like, "Oh, wait a second, maybe let's just cut this off, dude."
She was in the bed between us.
That doesn't. Here's the thing, dude. That doesn't mean. First of all, it could have broken off.
No, it looked like it was cut. I'll show it to you next time you come to my house. And it's not even where the part where the clasp is either. It's like on the other side of the thing. It looked like somebody, and it's an angle. Somebody went whoop, and it looks like it's cut.
Exactly.
Why would a nurse come into the room, sneak in, and cut that? Like, just out of the blue.
They probably heard the baby crying, or maybe you're forgetting to.
I don't know.
This, by the way, I'm glad. By the way, I want to say something. I'm glad you said that story. I'm glad it's in the video. And I'm especially glad of the other one, the one of Jesus curing the guy from paralysis, because you talk about it as if though you were in the room yourself.
Well, that's how the account tells it. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying it word for word, verbatim. You know what I mean? I'm just telling you the short and skinny of the story of how it happened.
Okay, now look, since you had over 3 minutes here, give me a couple. I'm going to first address the one of the Jesus story curing the guy with paralysis and blah 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 blah. Here's why I will say with absolute certainty that is not true, and also what I'm about to bet doesn't really count because since I don't believe in these things, it doesn't really matter. But this is how sure I am. I bet my soul burning in hell forever that did not happen, okay? That's how sure I am. That's the only way I could convey or communicate to you and whoever's listening that's how sure I am that these things didn't happen. But that's the thing. You can't prove a negative. You can't prove something that's invisible. So all you can do is you can't prove a negative, but you can debunk a myth. And you do that by deconstructing the narrative and therefore disproving the falsehood. And that's what I'm about to do with that paralysis story and, the story about Alex at the hospital. With the story of the paralysis, it makes no sense that you have a supreme being that has incarnated himself and he's going around curing people from individuals from paralysis, but he's not giving information on how to avoid paralysis altogether. It's almost, it would be cruel. Now, I'm not going to even entertain that rhetorically, like, well, why would God do this? Because whenever people ask, wait, I still got about a minute. I still got about a minute here. The thing is, whenever people ask, like religious people, well, why would God allow this? And like I was telling you before, like when I said it made no sense that we're all God's children, but Jesus is his only son, you're very sure that you have the answer. You're absolutely positive. Now, it must seem like I'm being just as secure. The thing is, I'm basing my security on the immutable laws of physics. I'm basing it on what reality is, which once again, you seem to respect whenever you and I have worked on with electricity and plumbing and construction and all that. But you have this, and you're demonstrating it beautifully. You're demonstrating it beautifully. There is clearly, like almost, I don't know what it would be in neurology. I don't know if it's in the hippocampus. I don't know if it's in the prefrontal medial cortex, whatever they're called. There's a switch in the brain of most believers that allows them to just, for whatever reason, now anything goes. You see what I'm saying?
No, not anything goes.
Now you go ahead. Go ahead. You go ahead.
Not anything goes.
And I want to get back to the Alex one, but anyway, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I'm not like that.
Well, no, you're proving that you are, because. And again, I'm not saying this, I'm not trying to be condescending at all, and I'm not trying to be sarcastic. You're, like I said, the story of Jesus with the paralysis, you're talking about it almost like you're a good storyteller, by the way, great storyteller. You're talking about it as if though you were in the room,
No, I'm telling you,
Okay.
like I'm saying.
No.
What's the saying that I'm not doing it word for word, but I'm paraphrasing?
Sure, but you're believing it. You believe it hook, line, and sinker as if you were in that room and you saw it yourself.
Well, if you're going to believe in the deity, you're going to believe in his, and his works too.
But that's the whole point.
That's like saying, I believe in Egyptians, but I don't believe the pyramids are real.
No, the point that I'm trying to make is, like, that's the whole thing with this video. The human brain, or religiosity tends to be, and this I'm pretty sure other people have proven this through even MRI scans, if I'm not mistaken. It's a reflex of the brain. Like the brain is just trying to make sense of things. But for the most part, the brain will accept any story that feels satisfying and move on. And as a matter of fact, when the more complicated it becomes for a lot of people, they almost shut that off, which is why it took such a long time to show that the earth is round. It wasn't enough. Like, for example, back when the first person to have calculated the circumference of the earth was this guy named Eratosthenes before Christ. This was like 230 BC, I believe, in Alexandria. This guy calculated it. People just would not believe that, though, because it's hard. And as a matter of fact,
until they finally had a plane that flew around the world.
And now there's no disputing. And I guarantee you. Now, the problem with a lot of these stories, especially with Jesus and the Bible and all that, these are, unless we have a time machine, and there will never be one, because if such a thing would exist, it would have made itself known by now. Clearly. So they say that you could supposedly travel forward to the future if you go fast enough, but going backwards is impossible unless you go so far into the future, you come back. Anyway, that's ridiculous. I don't even want to entertain those thoughts. And by the way, just because I'm atheist doesn't mean I entertain every single scientific theory, like especially the parallel universes. I'm not so sure about that. Like when I've heard people,
you mean like the multiverse? Like there's other universes out there?
Multiverse, I believe, is different, and that I'm willing to believe.
You're thinking like the parallel, like there's another you in another universe?
Yeah, and infinite.
No, that would be a waste of time, just like for anybody. Why does it have to have two or three of these same persons? No, there's maybe a multiverse out there with multiple universes, and multiple galaxies and multiple solar systems. We're just one little tiny solar system in a giant Milky Way galaxy that all of them are still rolling all through space.
No, for sure. And chances are, like the whole thing about the Big Bang, the reason why I am very likely to believe the Big Bang, even though I'm not saying that that is the truth or anything like that, but it makes sense to me because people are like, well, how did all of this come from nothing? That's a wrong way to phrase it.
Then you don't believe that the Big Bang theory, that the universe was created from one single explosion.
No, well, here's coming back to the Big Bang. What makes sense to me of the Big Bang, and I've heard other scientists say this, chances are the Big Bang may have been the result of a black hole from another universe. Just like we have black holes in this universe that are probably setting
that are right in our backyard almost.
Right, that are probably creating big bangs on the other side. And that, by the way, for a lot of people, like, oh, well, it's very, very difficult for people to wrap their heads around that. And even for people like the majority of humanity that knows the Earth is round and that it's spinning at 1,000 miles an hour and orbiting the sun at about 67,000 miles an hour. So even the people who know that, it's really hard to fathom it. Like one of these days, unless you've already done it, take a minute or two and seriously contemplate how we are living on a planet that is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour as it orbits the sun at 67,000 miles an hour. And it's somehow like comets and meteors and all that shit are flying around us and we're still going. It's really hard to wrap your head around that. I think it's the same thing when it comes to the universe. And that's why people believe that religion ends up becoming this very simple answer that explains it all, And that's the major point that I'm trying to.
That's how you see it, yeah.
Here's the difference between, the thing is, I'm basing everything on as much evidence as possible. And in the end, I'm not threatening people to agree with me by threatening them with eternal damnation or death.
Well,
that's what you get with.
I even disagree sometimes with some religious people or some Christians even who are like, oh, well, we're the only beings in the universe. And I disagree with them. I'm like, why would God, if he created all the heavens and the earth, why the heck would he just waste it on one planet? You know what I mean? Why would he just put us? Why there's a zillion other planets out there? Why can't there be life on those as well? What keeps us here in our own little personal, wonderful bubble that we're the only ones in the universe. People that believe that scare me more than people that are atheists. Because at that point, it's like, dude, you're really closed-minded.
Okay, so that's interesting. So you actually, once again, you do believe in Adam and Eve, right? You believe in the Adam and Eve story?
Yeah.
If I remember correctly? Okay.
But they weren't the only, they were the first, but they weren't the only ones created.
So then you assume, or it sounds to me like you believe that there were then other Adam and Eves throughout the universe as well. So you believe that God did what he did with this earth, but he also did it with many other ones?
I mean, look how creative he is with all the animals we have and all the life we have on this planet. What's not to say they look like something else? I don't know. I mean, the Bible does say he created us in his image. So that means he kind of looks like us. So, yeah, maybe there's humans on another planet somewhere in the cosmos we're never going to get to see or interact with. So,
but you're positive that they look exactly like us, same skin color.
Well, let's say there's only one God and one creator and one universe, then yeah, there probably are humans on another planet somewhere else in another. I would say time, because by the time we got there, they'll be long gone or we'd be long gone. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't doubt that there's life on other planets for sure, and who knows what forms they will take,
Of course.
But the point I was trying to get at, though, the security with which religious people are so convinced of their beliefs is just fascinating, especially beliefs that we know defy the immutable laws of physics. That, in other words, people religious like yourself, you have no problem believing Jesus walked on water, but you would never believe that of somebody else,
Well, because nobody else is like Jesus. We're all human. We are not deities. We do not have any special powers. I can't heal the sick. I can't change water to wine. I can make wine, but I can't change water to wine, So, but the thing is that at that point, what's not to say that there little miracles happen every now and then with the spirit that we don't really see.
What's not to say that? The laws of physics that we know.
The laws of physics is what it is. I mean, we're born from our mothers. We live. We grow old. We die. We come from dust and we return to dust. And if you look at our composition, we are made of the same things that the rocks and the trees and the other animals are made of.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Once again,
the sand and the water, all that, salt. We have a little bit of gold in our bodies, if you believe it or not. Yeah. I mean, it's minute little things, but we have all those minerals and all those things in us, magnesium, phosphorus, all this stuff, that it's just crazy to think that, if you took, an ashed up person that's just been put in an incinerator to be cremated because they died, you wouldn't be able to tell it any difference from the ash from something else.
Well, we're in agreement, and it comes back to, I believe, the first law of thermodynamics, since matter and energy can't be created or destroyed. And I've heard scientists say this, the atoms that make up our bodies, chances are made up other forms of life on this planet. So in a weird way, of all the religions out there, just if I can finish this thought, the only one that kind of seems to come pretty close to the laws of physics is actually the reincarnation of Hinduism. However, where it falls very, false is in the caste system, the fact that they made the caste system. But the idea that, everything kind of, and I think even with what you were just saying, we come from ashes and we return to it, there is some truth to that. But just because the writers of these ancient texts had certain intuitions that were accurate, doesn't mean that everything they claimed was true. And
what if they were informed, though?
No, what? I'm sorry?
What if they were informed, actually? You say somebody's enlightened. Well, an enlightened person on the Christian aspect or the Christian spectrum is, a spiritual person, someone who has a lot of faith in the spirit, so they have insight. Look at Buddha. He was an enlightened person, came up with a lot of cool philosophies for his, fellow, I guess, Asians at the time, right? It was an Asian beginning.
He was actually from India.
India, okay. But most of Asia took Buddhism.
Oh yeah. And I don't know how that happened, but for some reason it's like China, Japan, and Korea, and all them are the ones that really embraced Buddha. But if I am not mistaken, Buddha is from India, and he was a Hindu, but for some reason he became a deity to a lot of Asians.
Yeah, that's weird.
Which, I mean, Indians are Asians, considering.
But then India obviously have Hinduism. So where did Hinduism stem from?
Dude, from probably whoever were the first people that started crafting those ideas, and they started with the Vedas, because I believe it's called the Vedas, even though there's many of them. It's not like just one. It's not like the Bible or the Quran. It's a compilation, and it's very old. I mean, Hinduism predates Judaism. But look, coming back to Buddha, I would say Buddha was a very insightful individual. But that idea,
enlightened.
I mean, if you want, the problem with enlightened is, it sounds to me like you're saying it with like spiritual connotations.
No. Well, he considered himself to be a spiritual person in the sense where these beliefs that he wrote down. I mean, I don't know exactly what they are all.
Well,
it was always of like still respecting your fellow man and being good to others and stuff like that and other things. But being an enlightened person through meditations and stuff. Look, Christian meditation. What is Christian? The Bible says sit down, in a quiet place sometimes and meditate.
No, and that's of course, and there's no doubt about it.
Meditate on the spirit, and that's good for your soul, and that's good for your body, and things like that. And meditate in prayer, and I don't know. I don't see a problem with me believing that there is a heaven and a hell, and the fact that I'd rather go to heaven. So why not join the winning team?
Okay, here's the thing. First of all, you're totally proving the points that I'm trying to make. That's the interesting thing.
I don't think so, but if you think so, then you're happy. I'm happy.
I'm glad we're not arguing. But the point that I'm trying to show, one of the things that I wanted this video to expose almost, and I don't want to say this the wrong way, but it's almost like sort of using you like a scientific experiment. Like I wanted to show how religious people think.
Guinea pig, huh?
There you go. So then I didn't want to use the word guinea pig, but anyway, but it proves like why the brain goes there. And it's funny, like whenever I try to interject with actual things that are evidence and logic, you go into this circular logic. Like you almost like don't even, you're just like, no, but that's the thing. Jesus was God. And of course, I wouldn't expect anybody else to walk on water. And I'm like, you're just going around it. But really quick, just to come back to Buddha, the thing that is just as false about Buddha, just as it's false about Jesus, the claims that they make that, for example, that the Dalai Lama is the upteenth reincarnation of Buddha. That's false. And you can say it with certainty. And that's, I think, one of the problems that you get with a lot of those debates. And
now, if he had, let's say, some lineage in the DNA, you know what I mean?
You might, hey, listen, just like, I don't know how many Asian people are related to Genghis Khan, and I don't know how they've done that through the DNA, but I don't know how many, because supposedly Genghis Khan, Genghis Khan, the warlord.
Yeah, he had so many wives and so many children. And
wives and women he raped.
Yeah, wives. That's what I mean. I said he had many women. I didn't say wives. I said women.
Many women he raped.
Many women, and he had lots of kids.
He scattered them around. Now, I don't know how they got there because the whole idea was, if I'm not mistaken, he didn't want to know where his body was buried. So even the people that went to go bury his body got killed or something like that. So maybe they're getting it from the Kublai Khan, from his grandsons or something like that, perhaps, whatever. Just because if they would have found, let's say there was DNA evidence of Buddha, and now they find that the Dalai Lama actually shares that genetic code. That's not proof that the soul traveled over there.
No, I don't think so either.
At all. That's not evidence. It's just evidence that small world, and people share a lot of genetic code. And good. I'm glad you agree with me on that. But it's funny, for Jesus, there's just no budging. For you, there's no budging on Jesus. It's funny because it's not Prophet Muhammad, it's not Buddha, it's not any of the Hindu gods. It's really, really Jesus. It's not Moses either. The one that you're really focused on is Jesus.
I think, I'm not sure if this is correct or not, but I believe that I was told one time that Christianity and God and Jesus and the triune God, like the Trinity, the Holy Trinity, the Christian religion is the only one that has a heaven and a hell. Mm-hmm.
No, that's not
that has damnation for the souls of the non-believers.
No, I will also link down in the video a documentary on the history of Satan and where Satan comes from and all that, because I believe it came from also, I think, if it wasn't Zoroastrians, there were many other religions that also had
Satan as in Lucifer,
right? And well, as many, God, that's where I wish I was a historian and I could say this a little more accurately. Let's just put it this way. The Satan that you think from the Bible is based on other, I think even with Egyptian mythology, even in Egyptian mythology, they had, they have a good and evil because that's what the brain is doing. The brain is trying to parse.
Like the Greeks. I mean, the Greeks created Zeus and Hades.
Precisely. And when you look at the image of God in the Sistine Chapel by Michelangelo, especially the creation of man, I am pretty sure I would bet $5. I wouldn't bet my soul, but I'll bet $5 on this one. I bet $5 that version of God is based on Zeus from Greek mythology, the images that they had of him. That's my whole point.
Jesus, Greek mythology isn't older than Jesus, is it?
Oh yeah, definitely. That I can also, that one. Look, I'll bet my soul on that one. I'll bet my soul that Greek mythology definitely predates Jesus.
We're talking about Jesus now. The creation of from God and Adam and Eve to Jesus is a long time. You know what I mean? So the Greeks said, yeah, there's good and evil, there's God and there's the devil.
And there's a reason why
definitely existed.
There's a reason why everyone came to those conclusions, and it's not because they're true. It's because that's how the human brain processes reality, and those are the initial perceptions that we gather. It's also, remember, look, there's also plenty of, oh my God, what's the name of this tribe? And I don't know if they're still doing it. There was a tribe out in the Pacific Islands during, I believe, World War II or during the Korean War. I forgot which one, where American troops dropped boxes. They dropped boxes of food for this tribe for them to eat or whatever. They started worshiping the boxes, dude. They never, I think they went back. God,
because they've never seen a plane before.
I know there's a documentary on that. There's got to be one. That those people.
Come on, really quick. If you took a cell phone back to 1899 and showed people that thing, they'd think you were freaking, from another planet.
You're proving my point once again. It's because it's a reflex of the brain. When the brain is presented with things it doesn't understand, it goes for the easiest answers to allay the confusion so you can keep on navigating reality, basically.
All right.
And so those patterns, like the Satan.
So why do you then choose to think that it's a bad thing for people to believe in a higher power like Jesus and, getting their souls saved?
Because it's never a good idea to base your decisions on false information. That's why.
Well, see,
and it leads,
that's
just
where,
really
that's
quick.
where we argue, is that you say it's false when 95% of the planet says it's real.
Yeah, but so do Muslims say that about the Prophet Muhammad flying off into heaven on a winged horse. Doesn't make it true. The fact that, and once again, it proves the point that I keep hammering. The reason why 95% of people are religious, again, it's a reflex of the brain. And by the way, we're already going into an hour and 10 minutes, so I don't know how much.
Yeah, if anybody stuck around for this.
And I'm enjoying it. That's the other thing. I'm enjoying it. So let's not make it too long, because then it's almost pointless. But
no.
And so whenever you want to dive, but it's good because even if we end it at now, at least I'm ending it on the point that one of the major points I'm trying to get out there, that religiosity is it's a reflex of the brain. And that's why I'm going to use the drawing that I made of the little brain with the, fear and mystery and ignorance going into it. And then like sausage of religion coming out the other end, because that's what the brain does. But you have to take it steps further. You have to go a few steps further. Just like with knowing that the earth was round. You know what I mean? Oh, and the last thing I'm gonna come to, look, maybe if you want to end it on this, the story you were telling about Alex at the hospital and stuff, that's another thing that I find very interesting. Whenever people talk about miracle stories in their lives or what they think is evidence of higher powers or supreme beings, it never fails. Those stories that people tell that they're like, this is why I believe in God. They are so easily.
Well, that's not just the only one.
No. Let me just finish the thought. They're so easily debunkable. They're always like the one that you're telling me. First of all, there's probably your memory might be fuzzy. There might have been a time where you and Claudia were both asleep. I guarantee a nurse walked in there and cut that.
Dude, I'm a light sleeper. Ask Claudia. Nobody can come near me in the bedroom without me waking up. And the door that they were opening, every time they opened that door, it was click clack. It's like that woke me up. Not the fact that the nurse had to come over and shake me and go, stir, wake up.
But okay, let's put it this way. And I'd hate to have to say something so tragic. When was it that Alex was born?
1999.
1999. Okay, around that year, I know there were wars going on this planet. It makes no sense that a God would go and do that for a crying child, and yet there were plenty, I'm pretty sure in the thousands of children being murdered throughout wars on the planet, and children being born with birth defects and dying from cancer, probably. Who knows how many children that same day died of cancer or from war or from just getting beaten to death by a drunken parent. That's the other thing.
And you know what? I consider ourselves, me and my family, blessed.
That's precisely. Okay, why don't we end it on this? That is the biggest point I'm trying to make. And that's why the brain creates religion. It's very hard to accept reality for what it is, especially all the cruelty that you and I have been very lucky, because that's another thing to point out. Your parents and my parents fled a communist dictatorship. We didn't. We didn't have to go through that. We've been extremely.
If we would have been born and lived in Cuba, we'd be totally different people today than we are now.
Exactly. And that's why the brain creates these things, and that's why you believe the things that I know are false, but I respect them. And here's the last thing. In the very end, reality can only be one thing. And you know this, that's what I was pointing out, the whole thing with electricity. Earth can only be round. It's not round and flat. You can't say, well, it's like a pizza. That's that way everybody's happy. No. It's 2 + 2 can only equal 4. And it's the same thing. Either
boys and girls are girls.
Either God created men or men created many gods. And I would wager my soul in eternal damnation that the second is what's true. The second part is true. So, by the way, I think that's a good way to end this.
Created gods anyways beyond that they perverted it.
Anyway,
all these religious freaks that started cults and said that they were gods and they were, there's plenty of so-called religions that are, I don't want to point any out in particular, but damn, I'm sorry about the Mormons, but, it's like their beliefs and their Bible and what they used was based on a man who wrote it.
Once again, you're proving my point.
That some of these claims are a little, outlandish.
By the way, you're proving my point, and maybe let me go one more last thing. That's the other thing about these claims that you get from religions, like with Christianity, that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, and in Islam, that, the Prophet Muhammad flew off into heaven on a winged horse. They are intentionally impossible to believe. They're intentionally impossibilities that basically are testing your loyalty to be in that group. That's how you know you're being lied to also. Not only, just really quick, because this I really want to get this in there. And not only are they testing your loyalty, the very things they're expecting you to believe, in the case of Christianity, that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, that does nothing to help you in life. That does nothing to inform you about health and nutrition and finances and your psychology. What is cancer? What is this? It's nothing of that. And yet they threaten you with eternal damnation, or they threaten you with death if you don't believe it. That's how you know you're being lied to. That's
no, but the funny thing is you say that, but the Bible actually talked about health, physical health. Being active, eating well. Not being a glutton and sitting around all day. And, walking on the backs of others to get where you need to be. And,
the Bible talks nothing about cancer. The Bible, for all of Jesus curing people.
Sickness in the sense of, yes, people were sick. People did get sick. And, some people, they were told, that person's demon possessed. Well,
anyway, you're proving my point.
Who are we to say they weren't?
Who to what?
Who are we to say that that's not true, that they weren't?
It's very simple, dude.
We take the book as a historical book and fact, as any book that we would believe that if we read and, the Egyptians were real, the pyramids are real, and, hey, yeah, they said they had gods. We didn't see them. Are they true? We don't know. I believe in this God. If I would have been born in Egypt, I'd probably, believe in the Egyptian gods. But if I would have been born in the Middle East, I'd have this. And, so we're born in the country, unfortunately, that has the Christianity God. And that was brought over from the Europeans, and eventually, that was adopted by the Jews, or from the Jews, and the Christians in the early church. And it all stems from Greece and all these countries over there. And I don't know all the names of them, but it's a worldwide religion. Christianity can be for anyone. If a Hindu, if I want to go over and start Hinduism, am I going to be told, oh, you can't do Hinduism, you're not a Hindu?
Well, that is the case with Judaism. Like, you can convert to Judaism, and you can claim you're Jewish, but you'll never really be considered Jewish if your mother was not Jewish.
Yeah, if your mother wasn't an Israeli, You're not Jewish, bro.
I don't know if it's about being Israeli exactly, but
being born in Israel, right? Being from that country.
No, I think it's the lineage, the Jewish lineage. You know.
Oh, so it goes back to DNA.
It goes back, and I don't know how it's kept by records and stuff like that.
I saw a documentary, believe it or not, and I forget it was the girl that's in that movie Us. It's a black actress. She's African. Oh, I forget her name. She was in Black Panther and other movies and Us, okay. and was that Nope? I think she was in that one too. Or no, I don't know if she's in that one. But they did a DNA test on her, and somehow her DNA is like, they called it the Eve gene, where she's like has the oldest DNA in record that, you know, they could be traced back as far as Adam and Eve. And these are scientists saying this. I mean, look it up. I know you're going to look it up.
Sure, no, I will. Again, you're proving my point. So look, I mean, we're already
proving your point on what? You're not right.
No, I actually, the things that I am refuting about, like Jesus Christ not walking, that is correct. It is correct to say that Jesus Christ did not walk on water. It is correct.
It's correct for you to say that because you don't believe
No.
it.
It's no one walks on water. Just like, by the way,
walks on water.
And no one flies.
With Jesus. Nobody else has.
You're showing the circular logic, and I hope it doesn't sound like I'm being.
No, it's just claiming that Jesus is the Lord. He's a God. He's deity, whatever you want to call it. He has supernatural powers.
That's the circular logic that I'm talking about. Like, that's the very thing that I'm trying to say. Like,
and that's why this conversation can never be. Let's call it a debate. The debate could never be won because neither side can prove their point.
If there's
I could say that I read it and I believe it, but you can say I read it, but I don't believe it. And it's just going to be a tennis match back and forth all day long.
Right. But fortunately, there will be enough people. I hope if more than 10 people watch this video, there will be enough people who will realize, okay, this guy that is adhering to the laws of physics and reality and all that, and he is being very consistent with reality. He is correct in saying that no one can walk on water. He is correct in saying that there has never been a winged horse for anyone to fly off into heaven on.
There's never been a winged horse.
There has not.
There has not been a winged horse. There has not been griffins. There has not been three-headed Cerberus dogs. There's never been a minotaur.
Oh, wait, you're confirming it.
What's the other one, the guy with the horse?
The Minotaurs? Isn't that the Minotaur?
No, Minotaur's the bull. What's the one that has... The guy is the horse, the horse body and the man head.
Horse. But you're confirming that, right? You're confirming.
Yes.
Okay.
But you're talking about mythological creatures at this point, like unicorns. Jesus wasn't a unicorn, bro.
But that still falls under the category of mythology. Walking on water, raising people from the dead.
You say that.
No,
it's not true. You say that.
No.
This falls under mythology when it doesn't. It falls under a spiritual belief in a higher power than us.
That are based on claims that do not adhere to reality. Maybe I'm just being. I know you're not going to believe it. No, it wouldn't matter.
It's the reality that you wanna encompass. People being healed. Yeah, there's never been another person on earth who's healed somebody by touching them, except for I think one of the apostles during the Acts that was given the power when they were baptized with the Holy Spirit.
Right.
That one of them actually prayed over someone and the person was healed. There's an account in Acts that talks about that.
Oh, by the way,
but I don't know exactly which book it's in.
Okay. Now that we're going to continue with this, you're going to continue with this. I'm sure you know that story in Joshua, and it's funny because I have the Bible right here if I need to pull it out. The story in Joshua, which I believe, because I read it recently, Joshua 10, verse 13, perhaps, the one where God supposedly holds the sun still, right, so that the Ammonites can be killed, I believe. Maybe I should.
Oh, I don't know about that.
I got it bookmarked. Hold on.
I'm going to have to go read Joshua now.
No, here we go. Because this just goes to show how there.
By the way, hold on, for all the people listening, you have a Bible. What kind of Bible do you have?
It is the King James Version.
and your fingers aren't burning from touching it?
I think I saw a little bit of smoke. Let me read it really quick. Let me read it really quick before I self-combust. Okay, so apparently it's Joshua 10, verse 12. Chapter 10, verse 12.
Because I can't look at my phone right now since I'm on my phone, but it's
I guess it'll be Joshua 10, 12.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm going back one more just so we can get there. Then spake Joshua to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel. And he said in the sight of Israel, Sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Aijalon. Okay. And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. And look, I don't need to read any further after that. Here's the thing. It makes no sense that there would be a supreme being that is all-powerful, all-knowing, and more importantly, all-loving. And he's going to
actually see a Bible here in the garage. Let me pull mine out.
While you do that, let me make my point. It makes no sense that a supreme being that's all-powerful, all-knowing, and especially all-loving is going to stop the sun in order for one group of people to slaughter another group of people. And by the way, by avenge, that barely touches upon what that really must have happened. What must have happened back then was men not only slicing other men open and killing them and just torturing them, women being raped, children probably being dragged into slavery, elderly people probably being burned alive. I mean, just imagine that. And there's a loving God that is supposedly holding the sun still so this can continue to happen. It goes to show these things are man-made, dude. These are the words of men trying to make sense of the barbarity that it takes to survive on this planet, and that you and I have not really experienced.
Joshua 10, verse 12.
Yep.
Joshua 10, verse 12. This is the New King James Version. So then Joshua spoke to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel. And he said in the sight of Israel, sun, stand still over Gibeon, Gibeon being a place, and moon in the valley of Aijalon. So the sun stood still and the moon stopped till the people had revenge upon their enemies. Is this not written in the book of Jasper? We keep reading on. Just put this in context somehow.
You're gonna try to justify it. I know that you're gonna try to rationalize that, and that's okay. That by all means do it, because that's the whole point of this video. It's to show how religious people try to make sense of these things.
What if we're talking about the sun standing still? To us, the sun rotates and moves, regardless over the sky, and so does the moon. But what if he was here describing that the Israelites won during a lunar eclipse?
I think you're missing the point I'm trying to make. It doesn't matter.
You get it though. You catch the paraphrase, not the paraphrasing, but the symbolism here of the fact that he stopped the sun and the moon at a certain point where, like a total solar eclipse, or lunar eclipse, whatever you call it, that the moon's in place and you're perfect in the sun there. Where at that point, people were probably like amazed. Their enemies, the Amorites, were like, oh my God, here come these Israelites that have been spoken about so much that they conquer and they plunder. And oh, look, the sun stopped and there's blacked out by the moon or something or whatever. Maybe that was the edge they needed to get the battle won.
It's interesting.
Trying to interpret that one particular verse.
I am not questioning whether there was a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse. That's not the point. The point is, it makes no sense that an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving God would want time to stop in order for one group of people to massacre another group of people. But it doesn't say
time stops. He says the sun.
It does say avenge. At least in mine it says avenge. In yours it says revenge.
Revenge upon their enemies.
Exactly.
So,
and enemies.
The Israelites are taking over the Amorites.
And avenging enemies, in other words, people are dying in horrific ways.
Oh, no, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the Old Testament is full of blood, bro. Full of blood.
And there's a reason why, because that's how life is. And that's how the brain interprets this. I mean, we could go on, and it's already 1 hour and 30 minutes where we're going into. So I think maybe we could go. I mean, it's funny how I enjoy these, but then it becomes an unclickable video. It's not only unwatchable, people just won't click on it. So that's why I want to wrap it up on.
Well, let's see if we can break this down into something coherent.
I'll try to.
Maybe next time we'll pick certain basic topics and just talk about that for 20 minutes and then stop. And then maybe pick another topic for the next one, and so on and so forth. But for now, I'm going to pretty much be done for now because I want to go eat, shower, and take my work boots off.
Oh, man. And look, that was the thing. I'm sure today you respected reality doing your job. Because
I've always respected reality, bro. I know that walking off the edge of a building will kill you.
Apparently not when it comes to Jesus, but whatever. Leave it.
Well, that's the thing, though. None of us are like Jesus. That's what I keep trying to convey to you.
And I'm trying to convey to you the circular logic.
He forgives us of our sins and that we're allowed into heaven, so I don't have to spend eternity in hell. And that's pretty much it. But I live my life on earth, as a natural man, living my life the best I can, taking care of who I can, being responsible in life and, not being a screw up, not being a murderer, not doing anything like this. Have I lied? Have I cheated? Have I done this, that? Yes, of course. Why? Because I'm human. None of us are perfect, dude. That's what we have to convey to everybody. None of us are created, all of us are created perfectly, but not perfect. You know what I mean? Does it make sense?
Yeah, and look, why don't I'm going to end it on thanks so much for taking the time to do this, brother. I really appreciate it. I love you.
Thank you for all of you who stayed and listened.
If anybody even clicked on the video, and maybe I'll get little nuggets. And dude, if you want to do other ones, if it occurs to you, and we could do them in shorter bites with more directed. I think that the trick is to have like a specific thing that we're trying to prove. I like to think that the title, Did God Create Man or Did Man Create God? I like to think that I proved that. We'll see if people watched it, if they agree that I did prove that.
Well, that's going to come in the comments, I'm sure.
Exactly. That's the whole thing. So we'll see, man. But I'm going to wrap it up. And for anybody who hung in there, thank you so much for watching. And good night, good day, good whatever.
Good life. And hey, Nachi.
Yep.
Jesus loves you. He does. Even you, he loves you. You know why? Because I love you. That's how you know that Jesus loves you, because I love you.
There you go. And with that, I'm hitting the stop button.